Yeah, I'm sorry, Chairman. I'm just having a bit of problem with Wi-Fi. That's why I keep nipping out. I'll be.
Okay, Graham.
I think I know how to sort it.
Okay, so it looks as though we're now streaming.
Very nearly.
Very nearly. Okay.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I'm just having a bit of.
I think we're now live streaming.
Okay, fine. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Development Management and Licensing Committee. Good to see you all. We'll start the agenda in a moment, but before we do, first of all, could I ask you to make sure that you're muted and then unmute when called upon to speak. Thank you very much. I'll go around the screen and just confirm that you can hear me. So, Councillor Mrs. Crawford. Thank you. Councillor Venning. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Fay. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Johnson.
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Hutton.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Smith. Councillor Graham Parker.
Yes, I can hear you, Chair.
And Councillor Squire.
Yes, here.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So for the benefit of any members of the public watching, this committee has delegated authority from the Tavistock Town Council to comment on behalf of the council on planning applications made within the parish. There are some exceptions to that, but mostly we do not have to go back to full council before we submit our comments to the local planning authority. We'll start the agenda now. We are quorate, so there's no problem with that. So we will begin with agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. I think we're all here, aren't we?
Yes, so no apologies as all members are present.
Okay, thank you. And then agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the 24th of November. Of course, we looked at these in full council yesterday, but can I have a proposal of confirming the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Ellis, thank you very much. And a seconder, Councillor Fay, thank you. All in favour, please show. Excellent, thank you very much. So agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. If you have any declarations of interest to make, please do so now. If you become aware of any interest, as Councillor Ellis.
I will just mention it because I've mentioned it before. It is the planning application regarding licensing of the Stanley Arms 2 King Street. I'm a member of the Royal Marines Association that actually has a room within that property as part of I think it's part of the covenant of the building. So that's my interest.
Okay, thank you. So as usual, if you do become aware of anything as we go through the agenda, please make it known as soon as you're aware of it. So agenda item 4, Dartmoor National Park. We've not received anything from the Park Authority. Agenda item 5, town planning issues. We're invited to comment if we feel appropriate on a new licensing application. And this is for the Stannery Arms. Previously the Tavy Club, previously the Royal British Legion. And you've got some information there about what they're asking for. But members will also be aware that we have received a copy of an email to the borough objecting to this application. Can I remind you that if we are to register an objection, any objections have to be aligned with the 4 licensing objectives. We can't complain just because we don't like the idea of it, for example. The 4 licensing objectives are: 1, the prevention of crime and disorder; 2, public safety; 3, prevention of public nuisance; and 4, protection of children from harm. So those are the objectives we need to bear in mind when we're considering this application. So this item is open for discussion. If any members wish to say anything, please. Councillor Squire, please, and then Councillor Hutton.
I have no particular objection to this particular application. It's been a long history of licensed premises in said situation, and I can see nothing untoward in its support in that end.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutton, please.
I have no problem with having licensed premises there. That's what we've had. I'm just a little bit concerned about music till midnight, several days a week, well, most days of the week. And I wonder if that's quite a lot more than they have at present. And certainly having gone with the street pastors to seen outside other licensed premises late at night, there is quite a lot of noise and I wouldn't want to live through that. And we are aware there are some residential properties nearby. So I think that's important, and I think that is a nuisance problem, a public nuisance noise.
Thank you, Andy. Graham, and then Tony, please. You need to unmute, please, Graham.
Sorry about that. That was, yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was a member of the licensing committee, I think when the Wetherspoons application came up, and although I wasn't part of the committee that took the decision, I did get the public comments and advice from local residents. And I have to say that what I saw then from local residents, and there are a lot of residents in this area, as a part of our policy to encourage people living in the town centre, is very similar to what I've seen from John Taylor today. So, I mean, I would have said this had I not seen that email, but that just reinforces that we have a policy of encouraging residences in that town. We've got in this area, and we've got an application on the agenda today. And I do recall that as a result of those objections, we restricted Wetherspoons with their support in terms of timing. And I would support what Councillor Hutton said, that I'm very, very uncomfortable about the lateness, both of the music and of the times of on and off sales during the week and at weekends. So I would certainly support a move to object to that, anything beyond, say, 11 o'clock at night, which I think matches with Wetherspoons. Okay, thank you. Tony?
Yes, I think it's a very clean application, and as they are new licensees and previous licence holders, it's a responsibility of them to adhere to what their application is. It says that it's recorded music, so it's not live music. We all know that live music is considerably louder. I think the hours are pretty standard. I think it's very hard to tar everyone with the same brush, because historically there's been difficulties, and it's an area where new flats have been built around existing public houses. It's been there for many, many years as a licensed premises, and I think it would be a detriment to the Act to actually say that we don't know if it's going to be a nuisance. As long as they abide to their licence, then I can't see that there is a problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
Yeah, of course, Chair, the problem and is that, and Councillor Fay will be familiar with this as well as a licence holder, is that once people are outside the licensed premises, the licensee is out of control of the noise and any nuisance. And it's the timing that is involved here.
Okay, James, and then Tony, and then Leslie.
I almost think the noise after licensing hours is irrelevant. You've got a kebab shop up the road. You've got another 2 pubs. That's a rat run for people moving from those pubs up to other establishments that are open late at midnight. And the licensee, although responsible for people leaving, is not really responsible for people congregating. On top of that, you've also got all the teenagers hanging around in the car park there causing noise. So, I mean, essentially, I looked at it and thought this is pretty standard licensing hours. I think we've looked at their plan before, and it's planning to be more of a restaurant bar rather than a full-on drinking establishment. So I have no issue with it whatsoever.
Okay, Tony?
I was just going to say similar things. I mean, you only have to look at that area of town after Witherspoons and Chams have closed, and the teenage element that can't get into the licensed premises, which are in that car park. I can't see how it can be narrowed down to us singling out a potential new applicant and penalising them for things that are already existing.
Okay, Leslie?
Yes, I'd agree with what Tony and James have said. I think this has been a licensed premises up until now. I'm not quite sure what the car park you're talking about is, James. The Bank Square car park. I think. Right, yeah. Sorry. And the noise from the union actually is considerably loud. Prior to COVID, because they have live music in there once a week. So, you know, I think it's something that the residents in the area take for granted. I noticed in the objection there was a part about the hotel, but this has been a licensed premises for much longer. And I don't know if these people have taken a lease or have bought the premises, but I think they certainly undertook it as a going concern as licensed premises. So I actually think we really should support that. And I'd love to see the building in much better repair than it is currently and in use. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, please? So how do you wish to proceed? James, then Tony.
I move we support the application.
As it stands?
As it stands, yeah.
Tony?
I agree.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a proposal that is seconded. Do you wish to debate this any further? Graham? And you're muted, I'm afraid.
Simply to reiterate, Chairman, for the reasons I've already said, I will be voting against this.
Okay, thank you. Andy? And you're muted too.
I will be voting against purely. It's just the lateness of the hour, the fact it's 6 days a week. It's not just as Friday, Saturday. It really could become a great nuisance. So I will vote against as it is at present.
Okay. Leslie?
Could I just say that my understanding is that Wetherspoons operates the same hours, or certainly did before we had lockdown. So I don't see it's any different. It's really around the corner. The only bit that I can see is different is the recorded music. But otherwise, I think that the licensing hours are the same as Wetherspoons. So we shouldn't, you know, not have it for one and have it for another.
Is there anyone here who can confirm that? Okay, Alan.
All I wanted to say is, for me, I'm absolutely thrilled that that building could be used again. It is a bigger place. It's got a lot more depth to it. As Councillor Crawford said, the union is noisy because it's so close to the pavement. But with the Tavy Club, there's a depth to it. It goes far back. Some of the entertainment rooms are way back inside. So I think because of the design of it I'll support it. Okay.
Any further comments? Alec? You need to unmute.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree with Alan. Because of the depth of the place, and we had many years ago, we had a reception in there, and all the entertainment seems to be at the back of the building. But what Leslie was saying about Weatherspoons having the same type of facility, I think you'll find that that street is very narrow. So you know, anything which is in the front of the building, that's such a narrow street, whereas Weatherspoons has got a big wide road outside of them. So I think I would support it with respect to what Alan said, because of the fact of the depth of the building. And when we went there for a family, an occasion with a family, all the noise and everything was right at the back of the building and not in the front. So I would support it on those principles.
Okay. In that case, shall we move to a vote? So the vote is whether we wish to make any submission opposing this application as it stands, including the requested licensing hours. So those in favour of supporting this, please show. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Jan. And those who are against this as it stands, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is carried. And in that case, we will not be making a submission to the licensing authority. Okay, thank you. We'll move on. So the next item is 5B, Section 106 funding for sports clubs in Tavistock. We've had correspondence relating to this, which is essentially for information. But my main reason for putting it on the agenda was that I thought it might be helpful if we could nominate a councillor who would keep an eye on this issue. And when it became appropriate for any sort of contribution to be made by ourselves, was on the ball and would be, if you pardon the pun, and would be able to lead us. And we have had an offer of such a lead, haven't we, James?
Yeah, more than happy to take the lead on this if everyone deems fit.
Is anybody else wanting to compete with James for this role? Looks like it's yours, James.
Very much confident.
Well done.
So that's great. So if you could keep an eye on that particular issue for us and tell us when we need to be doing something about it, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Okay. There's only one other issue. I'm not sure whether to bring this up under urgent business because it's sort of not urgent, but it's not on the agenda as such. There's nothing under general correspondence. I'll take it under urgent business, and that's simply to draw your attention to the West Devon Housing Strategy consultation again. Jan has circulated an email from the borough about that this evening. Please have a look at it. It's not too long and difficult. It will be on the agenda for a discussion on the 5th of January, but I think we've got until, is it the end of February to comment on it? But we've certainly got plenty of time. But it would be nice if we could have a look at that between now and the next meeting of this committee and make some comments. Pete and then Graham.
I've been in correspondence with West End Borough Council about this. They have a separate portal for the public to utilise. The one I was going to forward, they didn't say to use. They have a separate portal. So if people are interested in that, West Devon seem to have a different portal entrance for the public to use.
So that would be a different portal to the one we would use as a council?
Can I just say,
my understanding, yeah.
Jan?
Can I come in there? That's the one that I've just sent on to you all. So
Okay.
the one sent a couple of days ago were for councillors to respond to. The one I sent on was for information about an hour ago, and that is for from members of the public.
Okay.
It should be your information.
Okay. Graham, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chairman. Just thinking, it's always difficult consulting over Christmas and New Year. We have got an extension, I understand, till the end of February. So I just suggest that rather than the January the 5th, we take it on the one after.
Okay. Well, we might have a preliminary chat on the 5th, and then definitively the following one.
Fine.
Yeah, I agree. The Christmas and New Year is always difficult. Okay, so where are we now? We're now on to item 8. Jan?
Can I just say something there?
Yeah,
I haven't got the programme of meetings in front of me, but
Right.
obviously we do need to be mindful that for it to have time to go to council.
Right. Okay, let's have a look.
I haven't got a programme here, sorry.
That's okay, don't worry. So we've got the next DM&L after the 5th is on the 25th.
25th, yeah.
And full council is on the 26th. It's the day after.
But bear in mind, you won't have the minutes probably in time.
Really?
Maybe not.
Maybe we'd have that minute. Okay.
But it can be discussed on the 5th anyway, can't it?
It can be discussed on the 5th, and then we can revisit it if we need to.
Thank you.
Okay. So back to agenda item 8 then. And 8A is decisions by West Devon Borough Council. Does anybody wish to make any comments about the decisions we've received? Some of them we've discussed before. No? In which case we'll move on to 8B. James and then Tony.
Yeah, it was just regarding the 219 Whitchurch Road application, and we objected, and it's had conditional approval. The conditional approval was because it was a better plan than what was previously being submitted, and that all materials have to be approved. But interestingly enough, our borough council ward members delegated their authority on this one, and I was of the understanding that we were having closer communication on things that we object to see if they would follow it through with a meeting.
Yeah. I used to be under the impression, wrongly as it turned out, that if we objected to something, it would pretty much automatically go to committee. Apparently that is not the case. Graham. You're muted, Graham.
I'm having real difficulty with this evening. Yes, Chair, you're right that if the town council or a parish council objects, then it is put to the local ward member as to whether it can be delegated to officers or be called into committee. It's been the kind of practice in the past that ward members would call things to committee, but not always. I wondered about this one myself, James, and I think the situation is that the scheme was there were pre-applications discussion in such detail with the conservation officer that the ward members felt just unable to challenge the conservation officer at committee. I think it was just a practical thing. I mean, basically the conservation officer commented that since the existing, our objection was as much about the windows as anything. Since the existing windows are UPVC, then the proposed ones, it's okay for that as well.
Yeah, right, okay.
It's not terribly good. I'm as disappointed as James on that one.
Yeah. Tony?
Yeah, I know we've discussed it before, but the gardener application for the trees, is there any way we can liaise with the local authority so that the decision made can be clarified, because we've clearly objected, and then in their column for the local authority, it says tree objections, tree works, no objection raised. Well, we clearly did raise an objection. And so it looks bad to our parishioners if they see these. It looks as though we like it.
There's a problem with words here to some degree. No objection raised means that there was no objection raised within the borough, effectively. It doesn't necessarily mean that there were no objections raised by other bodies, including ourselves. But that isn't clear from the wording, of course. But there is this one does have quite a history, and I thought we'd gone through it last time, actually. Yeah, because the local member, the tree officer, Lee Marshall, and I think you too, Graham, were involved with this. And actually, the tree work that has been allowed is necessary tree work because it relates mostly to dying trees, which were not going to last anyway. So we were listened to. Our comments were taken account of, but you're right, it doesn't show in the paperwork. But actually, we did have an effect. Yeah, go on, Tony.
Yeah, well, we've also had in the past where I can remember seeing one of the first ones that we objected to a year or so ago was an ash dieback, and then the works went ahead. Sorry, didn't go ahead. They were objected to by. So, are we being given misinformation? Was it ash dieback? We're not tree experts, and so I obviously voted for put it to the tree officer, but the works got refused. Because again, that column wasn't completed. Probably just said refusal.
Right. We can always go back to the decision notice and the officer's report. And I confess I don't always do it, but more often than not, if we've got a result that isn't what we were thinking it should be, then I will more often not go back to the decision note and the officer's report, if only for me to learn what the thinking was, and improve my own knowledge and hopefully skills. And I certainly recommend that to members if we do get a variance like that. Graham, I think you're signalling again.
It's just on the 35 Whitchurch Road. I haven't actually looked at the refusal notice, but I noticed that we objected quite strongly on highway safety on that one.
Yes,
indeed refused.
Yep. Yeah. James?
Yeah, the refusal on that one was for visibility, lack of turning space, and the fact that it was opposite a junction. Yep. Apparently, the visibility you need in both directions is a minimum of 43 meters, I believe, and it was only showing 10. So that's
okay. Good. Any further comments about decisions that have been taken, or can we move on to new applications? Okay, let's move on to new applications then, on to 8B. And we start off with tree work. So this is from Whitchurch Primary School, and it relates to an ash tree that they wish to fell due to ash dieback. Does anyone want to make a comment? Happy for us to refer it. Yes, Anne?
Just to say that I support this application. I think it looks like it needs to be done, and fairly soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so happy for it to go through to Mr. Marshall, to the tree officer. Yep, so refer to the tree officer, thank you. And the second one is also tree work. This is 71 Deacons Green. Tree one, an oak tree, reduction of 4 limbs by 3 meters. Anybody wish to make any comments? That looks like a no. Happy for us to refer it to the tree officer. Okay, so that one is referred. So the next one is plot 3, land adjacent to Fernside, and this is an application for amendment to the elevation of plot 3. You'll remember that this on Crease Lane, Fernside is a property with some land on either side of it, from what I remember. and they're building some new houses there. One of them they wish to amend to fit in with the purchaser's specific requirements, apparently. Does anybody have any comments to make about this, please? Graham?
Yeah, I must admit, Chair, I've disliked this this proposal from the very outset. I think it was inappropriate. It was a bad decision. It wasn't the Borough Council's decision, I have to say. But looking at this amendment, it's better than the previous scheme. So, looking at it in that very, very narrow way, I would say I'd be happy to approve it or support it.
Well, members, shall we be generous and support it? James?
Yeah, just a very brief one. Quite interesting enough, this application has a section 106 attached to it for just over £16,000 that the county council have imposed on it towards building a new primary school. But they don't seem to have attached that to many other housing developments, that importance. So yeah. So they are admitting we do need a primary school. They're just not admitting it on all the planning applications.
Graham?
James, you've really got to keep the astonishment off your face whenever you talk about the county council and primary schools. It absolutely beggars belief what they're doing.
Okay. So we're all happy to support this amendment. Good, thank you. So the next one then is 26 King Street. Change of use from Class A to office to C3 dwelling. It's a listed building. It's in the conservation area. We're told that the change of use will not involve any internal or external changes to the building. And as we said earlier this evening, we do generally favour the encouragement of folk living in the town centre. Does anybody wish to make any comments? Andy?
I think we should undoubtedly support this. Yes, people living in the town centre, they've suggested there'll be less car movement, car parking space, but there'll be less cars actually use the building. So I think we should support it.
Okay.
Yeah, second that.
Yeah, I don't think this property has any parking, does it? Graham? And you need to unmute again.
Even though it doesn't have any parking, Chair, or any open space, private open space, or anything like that, it is always a delight when an historic building goes back to its original use with no alterations. I really do think this is a good move and a good application. I certainly support it.
Okay. Everyone agreed we support it? Excellent, thank you. Okay, now the big one. So the next one is Baker Estates Limited, land to the south of Plymouth Road, Tavistock. Now, before we start to discuss this, there are several points I think I'd like to make. The first one is that most of you will have had an opportunity to listen to the presentation that we received on Monday from members of the Baker management team. And I know that at least one of you who couldn't be at that meeting has subsequently watched the YouTube playback. Can I just remind you, you may well have formed some sort of view from the presentation and from the YouTube. But can I remind you of the principle of predetermination, that you must approach this with an open mind and not make any decision until you've heard the whole debate. I'd also like to make the point that we do actually have a bit more time for this, because the date by which we have to feed back has been extended. I think it's to the 8th of January, which means that we can have a discussion this evening, but we can revisit it if we feel it's appropriate. And I think probably it is appropriate at our next meeting before we come to final decisions. We have a slight hiccup in that because it's a major application, we would normally refer it to full council for ratification. And full council doesn't meet until after the closing date for feedback. So I'll take advice, but I think we will have to give the recommendations subject to ratification. Perhaps I could, Graham, I'll take your point, but then Anne, perhaps you could, in your capacity as mayor, if you could comment, I'd be grateful, please. Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had some weeks ago, I had a passing conversation with the case officer, and he made it clear that this is not one that's going to be going to their committee incredibly quickly. And so a view of the DM&L committee subject to ratification by the council would fit with their timescale. I doubt that this will get to committee before March or April.
Okay. Anne, do you have any comments you'd like to make in your capacity as the mayor?
Thank you. I don't think we have time to have a special council meeting for it. I think that would be difficult to arrange and to get everybody to come to, especially given Christmas. The next full council meeting is the 26th of January. I think if it's not going to committee at the borough until March, then I think we have time, and I think the views of this committee can be taken to the next full council meeting and then passed on, which I'd be happy to do.
Okay, thank you. Jan?
I've obviously taken advice from the town clerk on this because I was aware there wasn't sufficient time for it to go to full council, even with the extended deadline to the 8th of January. His comment to me is that we would submit the recommendation to West Devon Borough Council pending a decision by council. So we would make it clear to them that it wasn't a council decision, it was a recommendation, but that is what the recommendation would be.
Okay, thank you. So we do have a pathway that we can follow.
Yes.
That's very helpful. Okay. So some other general points then. You will remember that this is part of an allocated site, TTV 17 in joint local plan, which allocated the land for mixed development. And it is immediately adjacent to a more southerly parcel of land where Linden Homes have been granted outline planning permission for mixed use to include accommodation and some employment land. This application is a separate application, and my view is that it stands in its own right and should be addressed as such. That's enough from me. Over to members to hear what your thoughts are at this stage. Andy.
Three things. The first thing, the good thing, is that the idea of the houses and the way the houses were shown with quite big plots each with electric charging points at every house I thought was very good. There's two things that worry me a lot about this though. One is I still think we need to get some industrial land. I think there's a worry that for some reason we are having more houses and a lack of industrial unit land. And the second thing is the care facility, and it was brought up the car parking for the care facility. They sort of implied that there would be car parking, but not that much for what might be a 4-storey 60 unit. And they were asked about things like, would they be parking on the residential roads? And I think it's quite clear they would end up parking on the residential roads. And that worried me as well quite a lot.
Okay, James and then Anne.
Thank you, Chair. I really enjoyed Baker Estate's presentation, and I've gone through this plan thoroughly, and I've taken the plan as it is. I have several issues with this plan. So, as Andy has mentioned it, I'll mention it first. Is road safety. The junction where they're planning to put it out, I really feel is going to be absolutely an accident waiting to happen. TTV 17 states that there must be junction safety on all new builds, and I think for want of a better word, it's a bit of a cop-out where they want to put it. Ideally, it needs to be opposite Bishopsmead with the provision of a roundabout, because you've got Bishopsmead residents turning left and right out of there, and with this junction just down from that also turning left and right out, it's just going to be quite hectic. And although it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone, people do speed, and it's accidents will happen. I note from part of it, they've gone back and looked at past accidents, and there was only 5 accidents on that road, etc. But just because it hasn't happened in the past doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. And I'm really worried about a fatality on that road. Regarding the trees, looking at their tree plan, there's actually only 3 A1 trees. So that's top quality trees on that site. And I believe only one of those has a tree planning order attached. So moving that junction up and building a roundabout would improve the safety and access to that site massively. So that's my first issue. My second issue, looking at the plan and looking at the joint local plan as a whole, and looking at SP5 as well, the joint local plan states that all new developments must meet local housing needs. This is an exclusive housing estate. There's no other way of putting it. I mean, just looking at the house prices of developments that are happening around Tavistock now, and the potential completion date of this, if it is allowed to happen, there's hardly anyone that has lived and worked in Tavistock their lives that'll be able to afford a property there. So it's a very exclusive housing estate. You know, essentially we're producing another down road. So I believe it doesn't meet local housing needs. My other issue is the play park, a local play area. For all those houses, when you look at the local play area, the siting of it is fairly poor. And again, for want of a better word, it's a bit of a cop-out. It is essentially one very small slide and some tree stumps. That is not much of a play area. I know it's for 4 to 7-year-olds, and they'll use their imagination. You know, they can make a spaceship out of a cardboard box. But as this was one of their conditions, I think a much better play area needs to go in. And my fourth issue is the provision of a care home in lieu of them providing affordable housing. There's no covenant on this care home as to when it gets built. Essentially, if they get planning permission, they can build the houses, sell the land for £1 to the borough council, and then hopefully Guinness will come along and build a care home. But if they don't, then essentially they've got away without providing affordable housing for selling property for £1. There needs to be something brought in where, you know, the construction is done at the same time and people can't move into those houses until the care home is completed. They're basically my four issues, and I'll leave it there for now. I think I've spoken for long enough for the moment.
Okay, thank you, James. Anne, I think you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of issues. I can't see that there's any response from Highways to the consultation. I've been through it quite finely this afternoon. I see that it says that they wish to comment, but they haven't done so yet. And I think before this committee makes a decision, I'd like to see what Highways have to say about it, because that's a very, very busy road on that A386. The other thing I wanted to say was the allocation of part of that land as Class B1, which I understand is for either offices, research and development of products, or industrial processes. And actually they're looking to put a care home there, which I think is class C2. Now, you know, if land's been designated for a particular purpose, then that's the purpose it should be used for, in my view. And I very much appreciate the work of care homes, and I think there are a great need for them. But actually the income that will be generated from that and the employment opportunities for 22 people, and they didn't say whether that was going to be full-time or full-time equivalent or just part-time people, it's not as great as I envisaged for that site. I thought that these were going to be a site where quality jobs would be created.
Okay, thank you. Can I just be devil's advocate for a moment and refer you to paragraph 5.91 of the Joint Local Plan, which states, because I know you won't have it in front of you, the land to the north of, oh, Anne, I'm impressed. The land to the north of the lane which bisects the allocation adjoins an existing commercial area on Plymouth Road and is suitable principally for new employment uses. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Predominantly use class B1. The land to the south of the lane which bisects the allocation is the most suitable for housing. Other commercial uses can also be considered as part of a mixed-use development for the site. Graham's going to come and enlighten us further, but that is the wording of the Joint Local Plan in that paragraph. It does consider other uses other than B1. Graham. No, actually, Leslie, if I may take Leslie first, if you don't mind, Graham, because she's
only on that one point, Chair. It was only on this one point.
All right, go on then.
While we're on that paragraph, the word is commercial, and Anne is quite right. I was party to the writing of that paragraph, which was introduced at the inspector's request. The word is commercial uses. Commercial uses have always been defined in the use classes order, and you'll see now in the new use classes order there is a section, commercial uses. One thing that it doesn't contain is nursing homes. Nursing homes are included in the residential section of the use classes order. Now, what Baker Estates said continually was employment uses. Well, that's not what the local plan says. The local plan certainly says commercial uses, and I absolutely agree with the mayor that the care home does not fit within that use. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, Leslie.
Thank you. Yeah, I was pleased to see how they'd addressed environmental issues, I have to say. I agree with James. I didn't like the fact that they were all 4 or 5 bedroomed bungalows or houses. And in terms of the care home, we already have a demographic of older people, and we want to then put a care home, or if they're looking at putting a care home there, in lieu of affordable homes. We already have Fitzford Lodge fairly recently. I don't know what the take-up is on that place, but I don't think we need to be building a care home on it. We're going to look like a retirement town if we don't already, and I just don't think it adds to our the shape of our demographic as such. And I really think we need affordable homes for younger people. How are we going to keep people in the town? And if you look at the Devon Carbon Plan, they're talking about localization everywhere. They're talking about people working as locally as possible as to where they live. We should be encouraging that and encouraging young people to stay in the town so that we don't just become not a thriving town. So that's my point. I really think it's a bit of a cop-out to not build affordable homes for young people and instead leave it to Guinness to, as James said, come up at a later stage with building this care home.
Okay, thank you. For the purposes of balance, the bungalows there are 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom bungalows, and then 4 and 5-bedroom houses. They're not all 4 and 5 bedrooms. And then can I refer you, and you'll have it in front of you, to spatial priority SP5, bullet point 8. This is spatial priorities for development in Tavistock. 8 is delivering an extra care facility. So the need for an extra care facility is identified in the Joint Local Plan. That's for balance. Okay, anybody else wish to say anything, please? Graham.
can't really apologise for this, Chair, but I have actually got quite a lot to say about the policy proposal, the policy situation and the employment land situation, because I venture to suggest that certainly I've never seen a planning situation get itself into such a mess as this allocation in the local plan. You're right when you introduce the principle of predetermination, Chair, at the outset of this. But Section 38 of the Planning Act says that applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In other words, in accordance with policy TTV 17, applications for the whole of the allocated site, which includes Linden and the Baker site, should between them accommodate 300 homes and in the order of 18,600 square meters of B1 employment use. Now, it would be wrong to predetermine the application, but it would be equally wrong not to start from the development plan. So you are not just entitled, but you're required by law to be predisposed towards implementing the development plan. Now, the big issue here is the employment land issue. And in order to overcome the local plan requirement for B1 employment land on the site, the applicant has run in this application two completely separate arguments. One is in the planning statement, and the other one is in the Litchfield report. Let's deal with argument one. Argument one is there's no need for the employment to be located on the Baker land because it's all accommodated on the Linden land. And it goes as follows, that the Linden application is required to accommodate 18,600 square meters of B1 use and 250 homes. So it meets the employment requirement of the local plan and leaves another 50 houses in the allocation. So if the planning consultant argues then that the Baker application doesn't need to provide any employment land, it includes 45 homes, which added onto the 250 soaks up in the order of 300 houses. That's simply what that argument says. Linden's looked after all the employment, and between us, we've got 300 houses. That, so they say, leaves an area of land that they can accommodate an extra care proposal, which is a bonus because it delivers something that's a spatial priority. But I want to make it clear, Chair, that it is a spatial priority, but it is not a policy. The policy is very clear about this site. It's for B1 and housing, mixed use of B1 and housing, and other commercial uses if necessary. Now, if that's the true situation, and the planning consultant argues that the Baker application complies with the development plan and can be approved. There's two problems with that, though. The first is that West Devon now knows that the Linden application can only accommodate 8,500 square meters of employment, and that's 10,000 square meters short of the allocation. That we also ascertained on Monday evening in discussion that missing 10,000 square meters could provide up to 170 new jobs of all kinds, full-time equivalents, and have the knock-on of deliveries and other employment that spins off from that. So the first problem is we know we can't get 18,600 square meters on the Linden land. But the second problem is the one that the Baker Estates set out themselves on Monday. There's a major conflict in the Linden application. The council knows, and now Linden knows, that it can't accommodate the employment on the site, but the permission says it has to. Now, Baker Estates explained in detail, and I have to say that I agree with them, that between them, Linden and West Devon have got themselves into such a pickle that the Linden application can't be implemented in its current position. It could even be argued that that permission's invalid, which is basically what Baker were leading up to. But one thing that we and Baker Estates agree on is that the Linden permission either needs to be changed in a major way or it needs to be torn up and started again. Now, that's basically what they said on Monday. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us in a situation in which either the two applications will provide 8,500 square meters of employment if the council and Linden Court can sort out the mess, or the two applications will provide no employment at all, because the Linden one is probably invalid and the Baker one doesn't include any. So that's where the planners' argument takes us. That brings us on to their second argument, and they argue that there's no need for this amount of floor space anyway, especially in Tavistock, and they've hired Litchfields to argue that there's an over provision in the supply of B1, B2 and B8 land in the joint local plan. Now, with respect to Litchfields, what their report does is completely rerun the local plan. The inspector spent a great deal of time looking at the very same evidence that Litchfield has produced and examined provision throughout the whole of the plan area. Inspector knew about the apparent over provision and the reasons for it, and accepted those reasons and concluded, and this is just a short sentence from her report, but there's a whole section backing this up, concluded the methodology for assessing and selecting employment sites is reasonable and proportionate, and the selected sites within the plan, and that includes this site, are justified by the evidence. In other words, she thought about the issue, every issue that that Litchfield raised, and concluded that the local plan was sound and this allocation is sound. Now, Litchfield can be forgiven because they didn't actually take any part in any of the discussions on employment land, nor did they make any representations. So they really, in other words, they weren't there, they weren't aware of all of that. But it isn't enough to simply rewrite the evidence and to rubbish the plan. Now, Baker says that the joint local plan should be read as a whole. It should, I agree that. And I acknowledge that it says there's an extra care provision as a strategic objective for a priority for Tavistock. But as I say, that isn't policy. The requirement for employment land on this site is both a strategic priority and an objective, but it's also a policy. And it has a very clear purpose, and that's laid out in the local plan. It was discussed when I presented the local plan to you 2 years ago. It's got a very clear purpose. Tavistock is already in danger of becoming a residential satellite of Plymouth. And if the proposed housing allocations simply go forward on their own, then it'll continue to become just that, a commuter town. Now, the local plan, which this council endorsed, aims to help Tavistock become more self-contained by providing the opportunity for people to work here as well as to live here. And that's all contained, Chair, in that whole paragraph of which to which Baker Estates referred and which you referred to, which sets out the spatial priorities. The overriding spatial priority is self-containment, where housing is accompanied by infrastructure, is accompanied by the commercial and the service and the leisure facilities and employment facilities. And basically, it's to try and slow down, stop, or even reverse that daily horrid commute into Plymouth, which is probably one of the most unsustainable aspects of this town. Sustainability, that's a sustainability objective of the highest order. It really isn't good enough for the applicant to attack the evidence and the basis for that policy. The opportunity to do that was at the local plan inquiry. And it was, I think, tongue-in-cheek, referred to on Monday evening that my concerns about the employment site on the employment situation on Linden site was an irrelevancy. I honestly, my advice is that the Litchfield report is the irrelevancy here. So where does that leave us? Well, actually, it leaves us in the same position as in the local plan. And the councils tell the inspectors and the world now in the local plan, and I quote, "The councils will work proactively with the landowners and developers to deliver the development objectives set out in the policy, including proactive measures as necessary to facilitate the efficient provision of infrastructure and to secure funding streams for development of the employment element." So the inspector knew that this was going to take effort from the local authorities, the county council, the borough council, and even the town council through a neighbourhood plan to bring in the funding streams. Now, the way in which Litchfield's approach that is that, well, we're sat here with a site, an allocated site, nobody will come to it. Sorry, that's not what the local plan says. This is a deliberate attempt by the local authorities to promote the sustainable development of Tavistock. So, just to close that one down, I think it seems to me that West Devon's got itself into such a complete pickle over a simple policy that it's probably time for all of the parties, the county, the borough, I'd like to think that the town council, but certainly both applicants, to get round the table before all of this ends up in litigation, because it is a complete mess. Going on to the extra care, the rest of this is quite straightforward and very short. When it was written, when that strategic objective was written, the plan's strategic priority about extra care applied very specifically to Hazelden House. If you look at the submission document that went to the Secretary of State, Hazelden House was allocated for an extensive extra care proposal. It was the landowners, Mount Kelly, who argued against that allocation to the inspector. Now, Litchfields were part of that team that told the inspector that our inquiries to date have identified no market demand from any extra care or care home operators. Now, that was the evidence in front of the inspector. And as a result of that, well, the inspector said, well, I have no option then if you say that there's no need for an allocation for extra care, but to remove that allocation, and which she did. But let's be clear, right from the word go of this local plan, Hazelden House was identified by the Borough Council as the appropriate site, the right site for an extra care facility. It has the space, it's got the views, it's got the opportunity for, everything that an extra care facility needs. Now, it may be that the market's changed, but there's no information on that in the report, not even a recognition that there was another site in play. So, but having said that, we've got the new housing strategy. We've got a report from the County Council on the need for care provision. Now, I haven't had time to go through those, but I suspect that it would be well worth the members of this committee going through that and it almost certainly is that the answer to the question of the need for extra care lies in this report, in these reports. I briefly read the planning statement for the, what's the hotel? It's gone completely from the Meadens Hotel. It's just closed.
The Moran Garden.
Moran, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, an application's just come in for that, for a care home, and it refers to the Devon County report. So I think the answer may well lie in there. Until I've had a chance to understand them, I can't comment on the need for extra care. I've just got the view that the West Devon believed there was a need, and Lichfields didn't, and now it seems to be the other way around. But I will make 3 observations about the extra care. First of all, the mayor is right. An extra care home is not a commercial use, as indicated in the local plan. I'm absolutely certain of that. Second, Baker Estates made a great deal on Monday about the site having been chosen, identified, so as to accommodate a facility the same size as the Totnes extra care home. Now, I note Councillor Hutton is wrong. The Totnes extra care home isn't 4 stories, it's 5. I've had a look at the planning application drawings for that, which incidentally were put in by, not by Baker Estates, but by Linden Homes. And it's a 5-story building on that site. Now, if that is their objective, to put that building on this site, then apart from the churches, I make it that would be the tallest building in Tavistock. Now, that's in an area that the landscape advisor to the council on the Linden site said should be no more than 2 stories to fit in with the surrounding development of houses, and 3 stories could be argued as an exception. This would be nearly twice that high. So it's entirely possible that either the size of the proposal will have to be reduced, and the employment and the benefits to fit the site, or the site for the extra care would have to be made very much larger to accommodate 60 extra care units. And the final point about extra care is I very, very much doubt that the 24 parking spaces will prove sufficient here. I share Councillor Ewing's concerns and Councillor Ellis and Councillor Hutton's. 24 spaces does seem to be amazingly small in an area that has limited car parking availability at the moment. If you look at the Totnes site, you'll see that right next to the Totnes extra care home, there's a South Hams pay and display car park, which undoubtedly provides additional capacity. Now, I'm sure some of us have had correspondence reminding us about the impact of this development on Brook Lane. Now, I've spent a lot of time with the Brook Lane residents over the years, and I know Baker Estates will be tuning in on YouTube to this, so can I just take the opportunity to say I really do urge Baker Estates to take the Brook Lane residents' concerns seriously. Brook Lane is narrow, it's dangerous, it's badly lit, it doesn't have pavements. The junction at the bottom with that roundabout by Westmore Vets is dreadful. And if there is an alternative option for construction vehicles to get to the site for those 5 houses, which there is, i.e. right through the Baker Estates site, I urge Baker to give those residents an assurance that no construction traffic at all will use use Brook Lane. just closing now, there's so many things that are up in the air about this application. I agree with you entirely, Chair, that we need time to think about it now, think about which way we want to go. I acknowledge there are things for this application as well as things against it. I mean, we haven't even begun to think about the Section 106, no education, no proposal for the 89 bus, but there are still a heck of a lot of things that we do need to think about very, very, very carefully over the next few weeks. And I'm sorry to have taken up so much time, but there was a lot of ground to cover.
Yes, thank you, Graham. There's an awful lot to think about there. I'm sure we do need the extra time. Now, does anyone else wish to say anything further on this application? All exhausted.
Alec? Chair Alec Venning had his hand up.
Alec, sorry, did you wish to say something, Alec?
Yeah, I was listening to what James was saying about the road safety and stuff like that there, and going through all what Graham's gone through about a care home, etc., etc. Why would you put a care home so far out of town anyway? They expect all the people in the care homes to be able to travel by car or travel by bus, because we know for a fact there's no pavements down around that area at all. Everything James is completely right with the fact that that is such a dangerous area to be. How are people going to get out there, and why would you put a care home and do away with affordable housing? I mean, that seems absolutely ridiculous to me. You know, there's two different things altogether, isn't it? I mean, even if you go back to Parkwood housing care home, right? People have to buy those houses, buy those units, but they're at least within walking distance of going into town, right? And then they sell them on afterwards. It seems ridiculous to me to put a care home so far out of town. Not everybody can drive. Not everybody likes going on buses. They got mobility scooters and stuff like that. How are they going to get into town with no safety on it at all? That's my main concern, is the safety of it all.
Okay, thank you, Alec. And again, just for balance, the proposal does include a footpath which will go from this development to the bus stop near where the car wash is by Lidl. And there is a crossing there. It's an informal crossing at the moment with a central reservation, but I understand the proposal would be to have a Belisha beacon and a formal pedestrian crossing there. And then there is a pedestrian route all the way into the town centre. I would suggest that this location is closer to facilities than the Hazelden House location. The Hazelden House location struck me right from the beginning as being an inappropriate place to put an extra care facility, because it really is a long way out of town and it's a long way from any facilities, where at least this one is close to 3 supermarkets and so forth. So I think this site has more going for it for an extra care facility than Hazelden House. But the question is whether an extra care facility is needed at all. And I now have to say I'm unclear about that. So yeah, there we are. James, are you waving at me?
I'm not, Chair. I think Councillor Crawford is left.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Leslie?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, unless there's something different, by Lidl's, it's not an informal crossing, it's traffic lights. It's not a Belisha crossing, unless it's further back.
There are two, Leslie. There's the traffic lights actually at Lidl, but the bus stop at Bishopsmead, there is a central reservation just to the south of that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask, I expect Councillor Parker will know the answer to this. On the original Callington Road application or plans, or when it was discussed, there was a facility for extra care there. Has that now been moved on? I know it's not in the current mix, but going forward, not all that land's been allocated for development yet.
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe that in the original discussions, though, that was to be included, but my memory is that it didn't make it through to the final master plan. But having said that, Madam Mayor, in the heart of that scheme, there is a commercial area that's supposed to be for shops and offices that's I doubt will get built, so that land would certainly be available for extra care there. Yeah.
Thank you. I know I remember it because on the very original plans, it was adjacent to the sewage works, which I thought was very poor taste.
That's right. It was, yes, I recall. I'm not sure, I'm pretty sure it didn't make it through to the final master plan. I will check that and I'll drop you a note, Sir Mayor.
Tony, are you signalling to us? I can't see your left hand. Oh no, okay. Okay, members, how do you want to proceed with this? I don't think we are in a position to make a decision about support or objection this evening. I think there's an awful lot to digest, both what we've heard and also there's still I don't claim to have read every word in the application. I have scanned every single document briefly, but I haven't read everything carefully yet. I think we do need to bring this back. And we do need to give it some serious thought before then. I hope you're in agreement with that. But do we need an active approach? I mean, for example, one suggestion that has been made to me is that individual members could take on a particular part of the application to look at and report back to this committee on the 5th of January. Is that an idea that appeals? And do we have any volunteers for any particular aspects of the application if the idea does appeal? Anne, please.
Thank you. Looking at it this afternoon, I think for each of us to read it in its entirety would be too much. I think we'd spend the whole of Christmas doing that. So I like the idea of picking a particular section and looking at that in depth. And I'd certainly be happy to do that.
Okay. And if you were to do that, Anne, which section would you wish to focus on? I
don't mind anything.
Careful.
Can I move then that the mayor should consider the legal aspects of the various aspects of the local plan, the employment site, and the various planning permissions that exist, and review the evidence given to the local plan inquiry? No, I'm happy to do that.
James?
Well, I think it's a good idea, Chair, just playing devil's advocate here. If we were to divide it up and report back, that report would essentially be the individual's opinion when we're supposed to be forming our own opinion. And, you know, so just playing devil's advocate there, we just need to be very careful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Thank you. Andy?
I'm just a little bit concerned with how we go forward, because I think, as Councillor Parker said, we really should be taking, we should be taking this as an individual planning application for this piece of land, but it is so tied up with the whole two pieces of land that, in a way, how can we give a support or the opposite, object, when we think the whole concept, the whole thing now is wrong? And I think that's a great difficulty we've got. I don't know how we resolve that, but because it's so, we cannot really give a good opinion, because it may be because we don't like the whole concept. And if we think the whole thing is wrong, how do we somehow take that further forward and say to the planning authorities to West Devon, look, we think this is fundamentally, there is a major problem here. Does it need to be reinvented? And if we think that sort of way, then actually by objecting or supporting this individual thing, we're actually giving credence to the whole idea that this bit of land should be treated as a separate thing, where maybe we should be saying, if that's what we think, that actually we don't think we should be going along with this game, which to me seems to be become a game of trying to hoodwink everybody and just forget this 18,000 meters of land. I don't know how we go forward.
Well, that makes
that-
sense.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it may be that we do think
We've lost you,
we
Graham.
did get round a table as the three authorities and the two applicants.
Sorry, could you
Oh,
repeat
sorry.
what you said, because you froze?
Yeah, so it may be time for somebody to do exactly what Councillor Hutton has said and say, look, this is the wrong game to be playing. Can we not go back to the local plan and say, get round a table, the three authorities, and the two applicants, and try and hammer it out between us? Because one way or another, as this is going on, it's going to end up in litigation. I can see it. And actually, it's a very simple thing. How do you get 300 houses and employment and other uses on the site? It's actually a dead simple planning problem.
Leslie.
Thank you. I think Andy's made a really good point there. And I think I'm also quite concerned about the tight timescales. You know, this is our final meeting before Christmas, and then we're supposed to come back with some sort of decision, but on the 5th of January, because that's the only way we can get it through full council. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not inclined to spend my time reading. I think there's goodness knows how many pages and documents in this application over this break after what has been a difficult year. And it just feels a bit suspicious to me that at the timing, it's really tight timing, that it's almost like it should be given a nod to get through because it's tight timing. Can we either, I think Graham's idea about getting everyone around the table to look at that plan and to thrash it out between the two developers and what exactly is in there is a really, really good idea. And that's the only way that we can make an informed decision on this. It's my view.
Andy?
Can I propose that this committee writes a letter to the West Devon, to Linden, to Baker Estates, basically saying what we've just said, that this is something that we think the whole thing has become a mess, that we're unable to give good opinions on it because it's such a mess for the reasons we've said, and that we really would value the fact that does this whole thing need to be rethought out? Do we need to have some form of meeting to try and thrash these issues out? And we can say the litigation thing, we can say that we can see whatever happens, the whole thing, basically it could end up in courts, and we don't want that to happen. And presumably we could do that as a committee. We don't need to presumably do it as a council meeting. We can say we are the planning committee for the town council. I just think it's a way of moving it forward because I really think we are at a bit of an impasse.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think I'd be happy to write to the Borough Council and say we've got issues. Whether I'd be happy to write to Linden and Baker Estates, I'm not sure.
I absolutely agree with that. It should be addressed to the Borough Council. Yeah. If I were the Borough Council, I would invite Linden and Baker Estates to the meeting, but that's not our role.
I like that idea that we write to the Borough Council, and we can say that I think we've given it a good innings this evening, actually, and that we find ourselves in an extremely difficult position. We want to be fair to all parties, but we want to be fair to Tavistock and to the principles enshrined in the joint local plan. So I think that's the way. That's probably the way forward, isn't it? And we've got time to do that.
Can I propose that that's what we do, Mr. Chairman, and that you write a letter?
Oh, I thought you were going to offer to do it, Deputy Mayor.
I second that, Chair.
I'm sure that the Vice Chairman would love to put together a letter to the borough.
I would love to, Chair, but I'm ever so busy keeping an eye on Section 106.
I don't think much is going to happen there in the next week or two.
I'm more than happy to knock something up.
Okay. Now, I'll draft something and I will share it with the Vice Chairman and with the Mayor to give me their input.
I'm
And,
happy to help. I'm happy to help you as well, Chair.
I know you are, Graham, and thank you for that. But I think I think we'll keep it very straightforward, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll argue points of law or planning policy. We'll just say that in our capacity as a statutory consultee, we feel utterly stuck because we can't pick apart the two sites, what has already happened and what is proposed for the future. And we need to find a way forward of sorting it out.
Yep.
Absolutely agree.
Okay. It will be done.
Good.
We'll leave this application on the agenda for the 5th of January, so we can have another chat. My hunch is, even if I get that letter drafted this week, and I can't guarantee that, I'm afraid, I doubt that we'll get a response this side of Christmas. Everything will shut down next week.
Exactly. Can we not get an extension? Is that was part of what I was trying
Well,
to say.
there's already an extension, Leslie, to the 8th of January. This one, I can't remember exactly when it was, but it was earlier than that.
Right.
It was the 31st of December.
Right.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I mean, we can certainly put in the letter that we feel more time is needed to be able to come to a conclusion and see what happens. Graham, advise us, who would be the most appropriate person to write to at the borough?
I think this one goes to the Chief Executive with a copy to Pat Weimer and the case officer.
Okay. So Andy Bates, Pat Weimer,
and Bryn, I'm sorry, Bryn, if you're listening, I've forgotten your name.
Yeah, we've got it though. In fact,
yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Ward, it's Bryn Kitching.
Yeah.
But I would also suggest to copy David Fairbairn in as well.
Oh, yes.
I'm just scribbling down names. And as Mayor, are you happy that this committee has the authority to go and proceed along this route?
Yes, I think so. We
Okay.
have delegated authority on this committee.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I think we'll leave it there and we'll move on to the next application, if you don't mind. Everyone happy with that? Okay, hopefully the remainder of the applications will be less controversial. So the next one is 11 Oak Road. It's an application for tree work, crown height reduction on a Norwegian maple. Are you happy for us to refer this to Lee Marshall? Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so the next one is land adjacent to 24 and 26 Glanville Road. This is a site that has been before this committee on a number of occasions over the last 12 months, I guess. And they want to do some tree work. Basically, they want to fell an oak tree because of proximity to a historic retaining wall. And they want to fell a hazel because of proximity to the wall, and a more superior Norway spruce. Does anybody have any views on this? I'm looking at you, Anne.
No, I thought I don't think the oak tree was a very good specimen, and I think looking at the proximity to the wall, I think they needed to actually come out. So I'm sorry, I don't think there were any photographs with this one, which
No.
I think is a shame.
Yeah, it would have been helpful. I mean, I looked on Google Earth to try and get an idea, and I have to say, being just slightly skeptical, it struck me that the greatest advantage of removing those two trees was improving the view from the house that's currently under construction. But maybe that's just me being cynical. Shall we refer it? Yep, okay, refer it to the tree officer. Next then is 11A Mount Tavy Road. So this is another site that keeps popping up. And this is a re-advertisement for a retrospective householder application for enlargement of a patio area. And members will recall that this is a patio that's cantilevered out over the riverbank. And although it looks as though it doesn't quite project over the water, it certainly projects over the sloping part of the bank, which no doubt does become water when when the river's in spate. We objected to this on the 26th of February on the grounds of adverse impact on the visual immunity, too much COVID, amenity, and harm to the neighbours' amenity. Now, there was a lot of criticism from the neighbours that the plans as submitted were inaccurate. There were, now help me with this, gabion cages, something like that.
Gabion chair. They're when you go along the motorway and you see the cuttings with big wire baskets full of stones.
Yep.
Holding up the embankments. Those are gabions.
Yep. Well, there was some mention of those appearing in the plan as it being existing, where apparently they weren't. Anyway, the plans have been redrawn and this has been re-advertised. So the role of the committee this evening is to see whether we feel that there is any reason to change our previous comment, which was to object to this application. Andy?
I would still object. I mean, fundamentally, this is a river bank that's got something sticking out over the sides, and it just looks completely inappropriate. It's made of completely unnatural materials. It's just a visual eyesore, and it should be removed.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment? James, you felt quite strongly about this one, I think, when it came up last time.
Yeah, entirely the same opinion. I move we object. If we let this one go, it's just the beginning of the end for the riverbank, and you know every house will eventually be having their own toll bridge going across the river. So.
Okay. So the proposal is that we leave our previous objection unchanged. Are all in agreement? Yep. Okay, fine. So that's where we stand on that one. We object for the reasons previously stated. Okay. So now we go to 22 Trelawney Road, a householder application for a rear extension to form a link passage. So this is a link from a house to an outbuilding. The property is within the conservation area. It is a Bedford cottage. It's not a listed building. But although it's not described as being a positive building, I think in effect that's what it is. Right, over to you. James.
Yeah, I have no real issue with this whatsoever, and I note from the application it was to make life easier for the occupant who has some sort of medical issue.
Pete, then Graham.
I second James's comment. I would support this.
Okay, Graham.
I think we should be careful not to say that we've done this as an exception because of the personal circumstances of the applicant. Because the question is, does it harm the character and appearance of the conservation area? I think the answer is no, it doesn't, and should be supported just on its merits as a planning application.
Now, I was going to say that the applicant's health is not a material planning consideration.
Oh, it can be where you're looking, for example, Chair, for temporary works to suit a particular occupant, which are taken away when the occupant moves.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Tony, were you did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that there are other similar extensions being built into Longley Road.
Okay, thank you. And Leslie?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well that I think they were going to restore an outside toilet that had been there before. So I think it is actually putting the character back into the property that had been removed. So I think that's a positive point about it.
Okay. The mood seems to be in favour of supporting the application. Is that correct? Okay, so we support the application. Thank you. Right, so now we go to 6 Tiddybrook Road. Re-advertisement, revised plans received. Householder application for proposed single-storey rear extension, conversion of single attached garage, installation of roof lights and a dormer window. And that's the application. There are some objections on the website. Apparently the property is run as a business. The Tiddybrook Road is a short road. I think it only comprises about half a dozen houses. And residents are concerned about access, parking, the usual sort of issues. Over to you. James?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we supported this last time when it came before us as an office. But I did note that one of our concerns was parking. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks after we supported it, there's about 8 letters objecting to this plan. There is a business being run from the home. If you go onto the website, it advertises treatments at that property and actually gives the address of that property. I don't know if anyone else is like myself, but if you park outside your house and you come in from work and find somebody in your parking spot, you feel quite slighted. And I think with the extra cars going that will be there, generated by that business being run from home, and with residents' concerns, I think we've got no choice but to object to this application.
Okay. Graham? You're muted, Graham.
I don't think anybody has ever hidden the fact that there's a business running from here. It appears to be one room with one physiotherapy table and one member of staff, one treatment. The only difference between this and this re-advertisement and the one that we supported before, and it took me an absolute age to work out what the difference was. It's the addition of a door. And I can only think, because I've done a number of these physiotherapy clinics in garages and utility rooms over the years, I can only think that it's in response to a comment that somebody made that the utility room would be used as a reception area. So they've just put in a door directly into the treatment room to show that it's separate. Other than that, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't support it as we did last time.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Leslie? And then Alec.
Thank you. I mean, I was concerned. There were lots of objections, lots of feeling that people couldn't access their own property. I think the way they were talking suggested that they were really going to step up the business. I don't even remember this one when it came up the first time around, so I don't remember that we supported. That was back in October. But it's a very small area, and it just did concern me, actually. So I don't think I would want to support it myself, given all those objections.
The problem with popular objections is that they are not necessarily material planning considerations, and only material planning considerations carry any weight in arriving at a decision. So whilst one fully understands people's concerns about the parking, for example, and people's concerns that this represents an escalation of the business and therefore just makes the parking worse, whether that's a material planning consideration is another matter. We don't really know what the applicant's intentions are. As Graham has said, the main difference is that there's direct access to the treatment room. There is another room adjacent to the treatment room, which is labelled as a playroom. And I think some people are probably concerned that that playroom may actually be used as a second treatment room. But that is purely conjecture, isn't it? We can't base a decision on that. Or am I barking up the wrong tree, Graham?
Sorry, Chair. While you were talking, I just looked at the plans again to refresh myself. The plans very clearly show just one treatment room, and yeah, I know from having made this case myself many times that the amount of throughput that you get from one treatment room is minimal. I mean, the number of businesses that are run from home, a physiotherapy, one treatment room is indistinguishable. I mean, if it was an office or a manufacturing place, then yeah, I would be worried. But this is somebody offering if you like, a medical service. I really don't see any difference between now and when we supported this before. One door doesn't make a difference, and I agree with you that conjecture about the number of patients with no evidence is not material.
Andy?
And what if they actually were extending and the neighbours are not just being nasty, but they really are seeing a lot of cars, and that in reality there's 3 or 4 people being treated at a time in this place? I mean, is that our concern?
Graham, is it in direct response to Andy's comment?
It is indeed. Okay. Yeah, there would come a point, Andy, at which the enforcement officer would say there's been a change of use here, that you clearly indicated one treatment room. It is now 3 or 4 on the whole ground floor, and the change of use has taken place and would serve enforcement notice.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
James?
I mean, just picking Graham up on the major differences between the plans. I mean, last time I supported this because the plan was submitted for an office when quite clearly it was being used as a physiotherapy treatment room. Now it has been corrected to a physiotherapy treatment room. I find myself unlikely that I would have supported it if it was presented in that way originally.
So we're coming down to the label applied to a room, aren't we? Yes, James, please.
Yeah, I'm also putting my shoes myself in the shoes of residents living in a quiet cul-de-sac. The additional traffic in and out of there, you know, and cars potentially parking across your drive. I wouldn't want to live with that. The residents clearly don't want to live with that. Something we need to consider.
Just to remind you, we do have the option of taking a neutral position. Okay, can we have a proposal, please? Alec? You're muted, Alec. Thanks.
I propose that, like James just said, we can take like you just said, we can take a neutral position, but on the applications, on what we say is the fact we're concerned about the additional parking, and we have to take I still think we have to take in consideration the people who live there. I'm just going to disrupt them. Something, you know, if you all of a sudden you got an extra 5 cars going down there and parking up, you know, we have to consider what the people will live around there think as well. That's my opinion anyway. So
okay,
I would be voting against it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as I say, would someone like to make a proposal, Graham?
James just said something that made me look at the original application. And yeah, he's quite right that this original application was shown as a home office. And it was clearly described on the application form. I just had a quick look at it as forming habitable accommodation, i.e. a home office. A treatment room is actually a different, it is a different use. So I've just swung round to James's view.
Okay.
More than just the door. I didn't look at the label, and it's clearly a different use.
James?
I propose we object.
Okay, on the grounds of?
We're taking into account residents' objections to the proposed development, and that we wouldn't have supported it had we known it was going to be a place of work. And I'm sure Graham can help me out with something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think right. The difference is that this re-advertisement now relates to a business, the purpose of which is to attract customers and visitors from outside the premises. That's number one. Number two is that will create an additional need for parking, which a home office wouldn't have done. And therefore, three, we object on the basis of the impact on the neighbours. That there's a good argument to be run through there, James.
That sounds good.
If that's what you wanted to say, I would second that.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly my proposal. Thank you for
that. Okay, let's just do this properly. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Okay, so the motion is that we object to this application on the grounds that Graham has just enumerated. All those in favour, please show. And that's carried. Thank you. Jan, did you get Graham's 3 points? You're muted.
I'll review the video.
They can all be rolled into one now, you know that. And whatever you write, you know I'll agree.
She's too busy writing to unmute herself.
Okay, thank you. So where are we now? We're at 7 James Road, Whitchurch. Householder application for proposed 2-storey rear extension. Okay, any comments? Yep, James.
It's a large extension, but it's to the rear of the property. There doesn't appear any windows on the plans that will be overlooking other properties. I don't have an issue with this whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Graham? Graham?
I'm not declaring it. I'm not declaring an interest, but the neighbouring property is owned by a friend of mine, and I can confirm that this extension doesn't go out as far as the garage does on that neighbouring property, and it shouldn't cause any intrusion, I think, to either of the neighbours.
Okay, Pete, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I support this. From what I saw, it seemed a reasonable and understandable.
Okay, there's a technical issue that the extension would go over a sewer. Therefore, South West Water will need to give their blessing to this as well. But I don't think we need to involve ourselves with that. So are we all happy to support this application then? Thank you very much. Okay, so the next one is the Barn, Higher Wilminstone Farm. Application for variation of condition 5 of planning consent 6996205 TAV regarding a holiday let condition. And they're seeking a variation of the wording of a condition, limiting the use to holiday lets and the need to maintain a register of letting. Andy.
It was clear when they're saying holiday lets and they put in 6 weeks, they're trying to make sure that these are holiday lets and that this doesn't become a long-term tenant. So I think it's quite reasonable that if you want to make sure they don't have long-term tenants, you put something in like 6 weeks. The objection to that holding a register there, I think, is a sensible one. But so I could see how they want to remove that, but I wouldn't want to remove the 6 week let. Somehow there must be another better way of being able to show that people are only having holiday lets.
Okay, James.
Planning consent was only granted due to these conditions, and I think there's about 6 or 7 conditions on it. They now want to change condition 5. Without having condition 5, they would not have planning consent. I really think we need to object to this.
Okay, Graham.
Yeah, just following up what James said, the condition 5 of as it's currently written is a perfectly standard condition that used to be recommended by the government itself. You determine the use, holiday let. You explain what that use is to be, i.e., not to be let for more than 6 weeks, and to demonstrate that that's what you're doing, you make sure you keep a register. Those are the 3 things that make it a holiday let. This is just an attempt to get that door open a crack, and they'll push right through it. They're aiming for a full-blown unit of housing accommodation. As James said, this only got permission in the first place as a holiday let. I entirely agree with what he says.
Okay. Any further comments, please? No. So the proposal is that we object to this amendment.
Yep.
Are you all in favour? Okay. Can we specify the grounds, please?
The grounds surely have to be that the existing condition describes both adequately and accurately the nature of the use and the means of controlling it.
And we see no reason why it should change.
Yeah, well, that is pretty well the test for a condition.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, could I just, I did try to put my hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Lily.
Sorry, I'm just reading it off of the what they said. And I mean, this was granted in 2005. They are saying, I mean, I get what everything else that's being said, but it does say that it's in line with current guidelines, and that we do not live at the property nor reasonable. The administration of the letting is via Airbnb. So the addresses of the guests are not recorded, is what they're saying. So, I mean, I just, personally, I didn't have a problem with it. So I just wonder, you know, why we are doing that, really.
Graham?
Yeah, if you read on, it then goes on to say, if it is deemed absolutely necessary to include the register part of the condition, blah, 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 then we suggest the following wording that does include a register. So it's not the register that they're objecting against. There's nothing in the current NPPF that prevents a local authority asking an applicant to keep a register. What they're really after is removing the time limits. That's the thing that's consistent, and I agree with James that would have been the principal reason why this was granted permission in the first place.
Okay, I think we've made a, yeah, Pete.
I suspect a reason for this is the present situation with COVID-19 reducing the prospect of holiday lets, but that's a purely personal perspective on why this has come up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've finished with this item now. So we'll move on to the last one. And this is property known as Berry, Chollicott Lane, application for tree work. So tree 1, an oak tree, crown height reduction, tree 2, a holly, crown height reduction. All happy to, yeah, Anne?
Sorry, none of these trees were to be removed. It was all to have remedial work done on them, hopefully to make them last longer and make them stronger trees. So I'm happy to support that.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we refer it through? Yep. So refer to Lee Marshall, please. And that brings us to the end. Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed for your patience and for your participation. I think we've had some interesting discussion. It does feel as though we've had quite a challenging year on this committee this year. An awful lot of things have come up. An awful lot of policies and documents have come up that we've had to give an opinion on. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to a little bit of a rest over the Christmas period, except you horrors, you've given me a letter to write.
It's better than have a nice Christmas.
I have to say, Chair, I think it's your fault.
Why?
If you didn't chair the committee quite as well, then we wouldn't keep giving you these responsibilities.
Oh, I see. Is that the problem? I can do something about that, you know, Graham.
No, you can't.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you very much indeed. I think
Right.
this is our last council meeting this side of, well, in this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we next meet in the new year. Let's hope it's a happier year than this one has been.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well done for leading us through this year.
Okay.
Merry Christmas, everybody, and especially Jan. I mean, Jan, you've done a sterling job. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you.
That's very kind of you, and the same to you all. Thank you.
We'd be lost
Love you,
without
Jan.
you. We really would.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, Mandy.
Bye.
What happened with the British Legion Club?
I have to go back to my notes.